Hello and welcome back. So today we're looking at the trending players from December 24th to January 14th. And usually I do this in the weekly video, but that's getting a little bit longer. Thought I'd split it up and make this its own video so you can kind of hone in on exactly what you're looking for. So in today's video, we'll look at the guys who are at the top of the leaderboard since December 24th, and we'll look at guys with ownership percentages that you could potentially own off of your waiver wire. So right off the bat, let's look at the top performers. You can see Sebastian Aho, 17 points in 8 games. He's still red hot. Very assist heavy, but very power play heavy as well. He's 2.13 points per game in that span, which is crazy. I mentioned yesterday that Matthew Tkachuk has been going off since that buy low video I did on December 14th. So since the 24th, he's got 17 points in 9 games, 7 goals, 10 assists, a nice split there. 18.9% shooting is not crazy high either, so he could potentially continue this. And he was significantly below expected before this stretch, so he's finally kind of regressing upward to where he should have been. Then you have the usual suspects: McKinnon, Kucherov, Pastrnak, Panarin. Vinny Trocheck up here, 14 points in 10 games. He's on a really nice stretch. That line, Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere, has been red hot. Probably the Rangers' only hope at 5-on-5. As they are, both of those guys are on the power play as well, so they do get some power play production. Then you also have Sam Reinhart, 12 goals in 9 games. That's an incredible pace, 1.33 goals per game. Pettersson, 9 goals in 8 games, so he's red hot as well. And then some of these other guys that we're looking at, they have a nice pace. These guys are definitely getting it done. Svechnikov's still there. Rantanen's still there. McDavid, not quite what he used to be in terms of 1.9 points per game, but 1.63 is nothing to laugh at there. Then you've got Verhaeghe, 13 points in 9. Blake Coleman, 13 points in his last 9 games, only 1 on the power play. Shooting percentage is really high, but he does have 13 points in 9. So if you're able to find him on the waiver wire, he's definitely worth an ad right now. He's kind of like that Trevor Moore type, who is a waiver type of player who you can pick up and he'll get hot for an extended stretch. At least this year is the case. Then you go a little bit further down, some other guys. Mason Marchment, we talked about in the weekly video a couple weeks ago, 12 points in 10. You got Gus Nyquist. He might be available for you, 12 points in his last 9. And then some other guys as we move further down. So we're not going to go too deep into the leaderboard. You can kind of find any of this on NHL.com or wherever you look at stats. But there are some guys that we do need to look at in terms of trending. So what you're looking at in this table on the bottom, I've pre-filtered it to ownership percentage of 70% or lower. And then what you're looking at is this: all the guys in this table have improved from December 24th to January 7th and from January 7th to January 14th. So they've improved week over week. There is a missing week in there, but those were lighter weeks. So we kind of combined 2 weeks to get basically a full month picture. 3-week picture, whatever you want to say, but 24th to the 7th and then the 7th to the 14th, improving each week. So that's what comprises this table. And right at the top, you can see Eeli Tolvanen with the highest completeness rating, 82, basically an 83. And he's doing that on the back of significant hitting and really good completeness rating. So here is his player hub. And you can see here, 98th percentile in blocks, 91st in hits, 2 hits per game, 1.14 blocks per game, getting a little bit of goal scoring done, a little bit of assists, getting some power play points. So the offensive production isn't crazy high, but it is good, and he is getting hits and blocks as well. He's basically kind of like your Tom Wilson type this year, although not as prolific goal scoring wise. He's a little bit more complete in terms of covering everything. So if Tolvanen is there for you on your wire, he's 50% owned. He is a really good ad. He's been improving week over week, and it's not huge jumps. It's small improvements week over week to get you what you need in terms of category coverage. Now, a little bit further down, you've got Lawson Crouse. A similar example here, because Crouse has been one of those guys who has been a hitter and a goal scorer in the past, and he's doing it again. You can see from a 76, 79, and then an 80, basically an 81 right now, 7 points in his last 8 games. The shooting percentage is not bad at 15%, a power play point in that span, and 11 hits. And if we look at his player hub, you can see he does a little bit of the same type of stuff that Tolvanen does. Some shot blocking, some hitting, but a lot more goal scoring, 0.43 goals per game. So he's been getting that done. 17 goals on the year in about 40 games. So he's on pace for, around 34 goals this year. So that is really improvement for Lawson Crouse. They've got a lot of spread out scoring in Arizona, and he's been one of the guys that's been getting it done pretty much all year. And he's definitely one of those guys that I've looked at in terms of a waiver ad for a weekly pickup, but you might be able to hold him longer term with how complete he's been. Now, next up, we've got Seth Jarvis just meeting the criteria at 70%. You probably already know this in terms of him being productive, but 74.6, 77, 78, and then he's got 8 points in his last 8 games. So this is the reason why I'm never a huge Jarvis guy. The narrative is that he's, this very offensive, prolific player, but we just saw guys like Tolvanen and Crouse, or at least Crouse, who was close to a point per game similarly, but with a little better goal production. And then you get Jarvis, who's 20% higher ownership, who's got basically the same stats. Now, he does have 3 power play points, and you can see here, this is relatively complete. He does hit about a hit and a half per game. The blocks are a little bit lower. The power play numbers are a little bit higher, 2.43 shots per game, and he's 0.76 points per game. So at 70% ownership, 0.76 points per game is a little low for me. That's why I've never been kind of a Seth Jarvis guy, but he is getting it done right now, and pretty much everybody in the top 6 in Carolina is somebody that you want access to, as they are red hot. Anybody who's playing anywhere with Sebastian Aho is somebody that you want in your roster. So that would explain why Jarvis is getting some of that attention in terms of ownership percentage. But he's been relatively consistent in his improvement, 74, 77, 78, and he is relatively complete. So if he's available, you can do a lot worse on the waiver wire. Now, we're not going to go through every single one of these, but Ryan O'Reilly, 11 points in his last 9 games. That is something that we have to take note of. And there's not a lot of offensive guys in Nashville. You want exposure to Philip Forsberg. He's their number 1 player, offensively speaking. They do have Roman Josi, obviously. He's a guy that you want exposure to. And O'Reilly plays power play 1 with both of those guys. So this is the reason why you would want to have him. 11% shooting is definitely sustainable. 3 goals, 8 assists is not bad. 5 power play points is really nice as well. And he gets some face-off wins if you're in a face-off league. Now, when we turn to his player hub, you can see not a lot of hitting, but he gets some shot blocks, 96th percentile in power play points, which is something kind of unique for Ryan O'Reilly. He's never been this type of power play guy, but 18 power play points on the year in 43 games. That will do it. And he's got 2.4 shots per game, 0.88 points per game. So 69% owned. This is a similar thing with, who would you rather have, Seth Jarvis or Ryan O'Reilly? O'Reilly's going to get you a little bit more of everything except for hits. So if you do need those hits, Jarvis is a little bit better. If you want the power play production, O'Reilly is the guy for that, especially if you're in a points league that weights that a little bit heavier. Now, as we turn to a guy who just came off IR, Jaden Schwartz, this is kind of a data anomaly because he kind of stayed the same here because he was on IR, but he's back now. He was relatively productive before he went out. He was red hot, honestly, before he went out. And then he goes on IR, comes back. Now he's 19% owned. And he's never been a guy that I've looked at as a longer-term hold. But if you look at the power play production, pretty good. So 8 power play points in 26 games. Getting some blocks, not a ton of hits, but almost a hit per game. And then pretty much what you'd expect over here for the offensive production, 0.73 points per game, 0.35 goals per game. And then assists are pretty much right there in line with everything else. And he's a 76 overall on the hub. So if he's available, Seattle has been on a red hot tear right now. I believe they're 9-0-2 in their last 11. They take on the Rangers on Tuesday. I'll be at that game, taking my boys to their first ever game at the Garden. So hopefully the Rangers can pull that one out. But it is going to be tough because Joey Daccord is red hot, and so is the Seattle Kraken. And nobody's paying attention to Jaden Schwartz right now, so you could get out in front of that and pick him up as they're red hot. Now, a guy I do own in one of my leagues, Trevor Moore. He's been one of those goal scorers that you want to have on your roster for a long time now. He's been that Moore, Danault, Arvidsson line last year, and then this year, I believe it's Moore, Danault, Fiala. They have mixed it up a little bit, but here's his hub. You can see 96th percentile in goals, 94th percentile in shots, 3.15 shots per game. That's why you're going to own him. You don't see his numbers up here, which means he's not in the top 200 in scoring since December 24th, but that doesn't mean that you don't want him on your roster. Goal scorers are streaky, and when they get hot, you definitely want those guys in your lineup. 96% in goals production for Trevor Moore. That's the reason you'd own him. That and the shot volume is going to help your team chip away, especially if you get extra point weighting for goals and shots. So Trevor Moore is another guy that I've owned on and off over the last 2 years. He's definitely worth the pickup. Another guy who came up off of IR, Thomas Chabot, 5 points in his last 7. He's been improving since coming back from injury, and he's now up to a 75, which is really nice to see. I do own him in one league. I missed out on him in my my categories league, and his shot volume is mainly why you would own him. He is a heavy volume shooter, 2.75 shots per game. You're also getting 89th percentile in blocks, 2.19 blocks per game. And I believe he is quarterbacking the power play in Ottawa. You never know. It could be him. It could be Chychrun. Could be Sanderson. But Chabot seems to get a little bit more of the power play time. He is 64% owned, so he might not be there for you in all league formats. But if he is there, just for the shot volume and the blocks alone, he's worth keeping on your roster. Now, there is a couple more guys that we can get to. McTavish, he's been not red hot, but 6 points in his last 9, a power play point, some hits, some blocks in that span. He's been steadily improving, kind of plateauing here over the last couple weeks. His ownership percentage is a little bit high considering what he does. But a guy right beneath him that we do need to talk about is Joel Farabee. So Farabee, I picked up in one of my leagues not that long ago, kind of as a stream. And he's been really productive. So 11 points in his last 10, 3 power play points, 13% shooting is reasonable and definitely sustainable, 10 blocks in 10 games, half a hit per game, and he's been pretty much one of the best players on the Flyers in that span. You can see here, 92nd percentile in blocks, 88th in assists. The power play production is not that high, 4 power play points in 43 games. Their power play in general just hasn't been great. Now they bring in Drysdale, and I wonder if that increases their power play percentage because they've been bottom 5 in the league all season. So Drysdale right beneath him is another guy that we'll just touch on briefly, but Farabee has been one of those goal-scoring options, 0.33 goals per game, getting the assist to follow, and then a little bit of shot volume. 2.21 is not great, but it's not bad either, and then you're getting some blocks along with that. So Farabee, if he's available, he's 35% owned. He's definitely a guy that I've gone to this year, and I'm playing Toe Dragons this week, and Toe Dragons has Farabee on his roster, so that will be a difficult matchup for me. I do have Konechny, though, so I should be able to cancel him out there, as they do play together frequently, and they're both killing it right now. As we can take a look, we can just scan this out here, and we scroll down a little bit. You can see some of these guys up at the top. Here's Farabee right there at 11 points in 10 games. And right above him is Konechny at 12 points in 10 games. So that will be a nice little battle this week. Then you have Jamie Drysdale. He's been improving drastically. So this is something that you definitely want to pay attention to as I screw up the view on the screen. There we go. So a 53 up to a 65 up to a 74. So he just wasn't doing a whole lot in Anaheim. They weren't giving him a lot of looks. He, I believe, lost the power play time to Cam Fowler or Minchikov or whoever, depending on the time frame. But since coming over to Philly, he's now going to get that power play one time. He does have a power play point since joining Philly. 5 points in his last 8 games. 17 shots is not bad. 16 blocks in 8 games. That's 2 blocks per game. And as we look at his hub, the blocks are there, 1.58 blocks per game, but they will continue to increase as he stays healthy. So he wasn't healthy for most of the season earlier on. He is getting assists, he is getting some shots, and now he's going to start to get some power play time and some power play points. So this could potentially improve from here, but he's already jumped a crazy amount from 53 all the way up to a 74. So at 37% owned, he probably would be worth a flyer, no pun intended, at this point in the season. But he has been scooped up in all the leagues that I'm in because guys are kind of paying attention to that already. Now, one of the guys that we do have to touch on is Timothy Liljegren. He's been doing it for a little while now, and he's one of those guys that's getting peripherals pretty consistently, but he started to produce. So 6 points in his last 10 games is not bad. They have had a ton of injuries on that blue line, and he's been stepping up in the wake of those injuries, going from a 52 to a 64 and up to a 70. He's now up to a 71. And as we look at his hub, there is a lot of blocks there, 2.22 blocks per game, 1.17 hits per game. He is getting a little bit of power play time, 2 power play points on the season in only 23 games, as he's been in and out of the lineup before this span where they had a bunch of injuries. Not a crazy amount of offensive production, but it has been there lately in terms of the 6 points in his last 10. So this is a guy that I've been looking at. He's never really reached that level where I want to talk about him in a weekly video, but we will feature him here as he does meet the criteria, and he has been improving. A total change of 18 from December 24th to January 14th, going from a 52 to a 71. So really nice production there. Similar story with Matt Roy. Never been one of those guys. He's a peripherals kind of guy, and he's been getting it done for LA, and they are struggling, relatively speaking. They are one of the powerhouses in the league, but they haven't necessarily been getting it done lately. As we pull up his hub, you can see a little bit of shot volume there, almost 2 shots per game, but you're getting 1.72 hits, 2.31 blocks per game. So typically with the hits and blocks guy, I like to factor in a little bit of offensive production. That hasn't been the case for Matt Roy, but you are getting consistent hits and blocks and some shot volume from him as well. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on everybody here. There are a couple guys we do have to talk about, so I'll kind of filter those out. Rickard Rakell, 8 points in his last 9 games, only 43% owned. He was a guy in years past who was getting above 3 shots per game average. There were times where he was 4 shots per game guy. That's not the case right now, but if he's going to be getting you exposure to Pittsburgh's top 6, if he's going to be playing anywhere with Crosby, that is something that you want to have access to. And as we look at his hub here, 1.17 hits per game is really nice to get out of a player like this. You're getting 2.59 shots per game, and the power play production is starting to come. 3 power play points in his last 9 games, as you can see at the top here. Shooting percentage is reasonable. He's a +5 in that span. He's getting over a hit per game in that span and some blocks along with that. So he's improved 13 spots from a 56 to a 69, and that's coming off of injuries, so he's only starting to get into his game and play a little bit better week over week, but he's definitely somebody that you got to have your eye on. Now, I talked about Hartman in last week's video. Nothing crazy there in terms of offensive production, but 7 points in his last 10. He is a -4, so only slight increases there. As I pull this off the screen, we do want to talk about Tarasenko. He's been kind of middling there in terms of his rating, not doing a lot of anything else, but he is getting some production, 8 points in his last 9. 22% shooting is a little bit high, but not crazy high. He's a +2 right now on a team that's really bad. And he might be trade bait. So heading into the trade deadline, these are guys that you want to pay attention to, as they might end up changing teams. And as I showed last year, I did a deep dive in this. Anybody who gets moved at the deadline usually increases production by about 22%. So if you can get out in front of that and pick him up now, he's playing pretty much at a point per game pace, and then you can factor in that extra 22% boost. Here's his player hub. Nothing crazy in terms of hits and blocks. Power play production's okay at 5 power play points on the year. Mainly assist heavy, which isn't going to track with what you would think. He's normally a goal scorer. 10 goals on the year is not bad, but 4 goals in his last 9 is nice. So he is getting there, and he might be some trade bait heading towards the deadline. So that would be one thing to keep in mind as you're looking at him on the wire. But 45% is a little bit high for him. Now, a guy I keep seeing in my data is Morgan Geekie. I've never been a big fan just because of the fact that he's basically a 4th line type of player who's been getting an opportunity maybe in the middle 6 in Boston. If you look at his hub, there's nothing that's going to jump off the page here. The shot volume is 1.83. That's not crazy high. Power play production is pretty good at 6 power play points on the year. Blocks are okay. Hits are not great. Nothing really here to get excited about, but he does have 8 points in his last 10, 3 on the power play, 19 shots, and then he's a +2 in that span as well. So in deeper leagues, he might be a guy that you could look at a 16% ownership. Not that deep of a league, but kind of a deeper play. One guy I do want to touch on, and I did pick him up in my THHL league, is Nazem Kadri. Don't look now, but the Calgary Flames are playing some pretty good hockey. They're one of the better defensive teams in the league over this span, and Kadri has 10 points in his last 9 games, 6 goals, and a 22% shooting percentage is reasonable. So that's not crazy high. The shot volume is 3 shots per game in that span. He's a +8. He's getting a little bit of hits and blocks coverage in there as well. And he's a guy that is typically a goal scorer, and he's been kind of adding in some shot volume this year. And you can see it here on his hub. 3.16 shots per game is the main reason to own him. You're getting a ton of shot volume. You're getting some goal production, 0.33 goals per game, so a goal every 3 games or so. The hitting could be a little bit better. He does have that in him. He just hasn't gotten it going yet. And then on top of that, the power play production should start to come as they start to figure that out. Huberdeau's getting a little bit hotter as well. He's almost a point per game over his last 9 since we called him out on the channel. So Kadri is a guy that is pretty high owned, considering the fact that he hasn't been that productive this year, but he is starting to find it. So if he's available on your wire, I would definitely recommend going out and scooping him up. We also have to talk about Sharangovich. Same team, 6 goals in 9 games, 9 points in that span, 3 power play points, and I will pull up his hub in just a second, but you can see same type of thing with the shooting percentage. He's, pretty reasonable, and he kind of goes off on these goal scoring streaks. He had a hat trick in one of these games, and you can see from the hub, he is a goal scorer right now, 0.40 goals per game. So he's, not as high in terms of shot volume. Power play production is pretty much the same at 5 power play points on the year, but the goal scoring is there, and he is a little bit streakier. So that is something that you have to note. If you're going to take a shot on him, you got to hold him for a week or two and wait for him to have that one game that makes it worth it. But I did drop him before that hat trick, which is why I'm cautioning you all to do that. So he has been really productive in stretches this year, and this is one of those stretches. A point per game, 6 goals in 9 games is really nice for Sharangovich. Now, a couple other guys down as we look a little bit further. Jack Quinn, we mentioned last week. He's been improving week over week. Just doesn't have the stats to follow this week, but that line is back together. Cousins, Quinn, Peterka. So you do want to have access to that. Only 4% owned. So in deeper leagues, definitely worth a pickup there. Josh Manson, kind of a hits and blocks D, who's been putting in some offensive production. 5 points in his last 7, 14 shots, so 2 shots per game in that span. 28 hits in 7 games. That's 4 hits per game pace. Really crazy high there for Josh Manson. He's been kind of doing a little bit of everything for Colorado as they try to maintain hold or get back hold of first in the division. So these are some of the guys that you can, have access to. If you want to play around with this yourself, you can get access to this exact thing that I'm using, the trending players data. This is available via the Patreon link in the description below. I'm not going to spend too much time on some of these guys. We've done a little bit of work here already, and this video is going a little bit longer. So if you want to play around with this yourself, visit that Patreon link in the description below. But that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully this was a little bit informative for you and you found somebody for your waiver wire. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again as always, and I'll see you in the next one.